What's up, college football fans? It's the one and only Cole Thompson here, and happy Memorial Day weekend to everyone. But before we begin this video, if you currently are serving, have previously served, or know somebody that served and paid the ultimate sacrifice with their life defending this country, thank you for your service. And for anybody out there that's partying this weekend, going out and popping off fireworks, please remember to drink responsibly. And let's continue our series on what defines a winning season for every major contender in 2024. Today, I want to talk about a team from the SEC. They're good enough to go toe-to-toe with almost every other opponent. They're good enough to make it to Atlanta. They're good enough to make it to the college football playoff. But they're not Georgia, they're not Texas, they're not Ole Miss, they're not even Alabama, so they're kind of just lost in translation. Of course, I'm talking about those up in Knoxville. What defines a winning season for the Tennessee Volunteers at Neyland Stadium? But before we begin this video, if you're new to the channel, welcome on in. I talk college football every single day, so hit subscribe, hit the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode just saying it. And of course, make sure you're following me on all the social media platforms at Mr. Cole Thompson. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. By the way, tell your friends, family, mortal enemies, best of bros, SEC fans, veterans everywhere, and Tennessee faithful about this channel, because we're on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking about our favorite sport, but also the #1 college football community right here on YouTube. And every Monday, I do a Mailbag Monday. I also do one-off videos. If you would like to be a part of that, email me, colethompsonwriting@gmail.com, or slide in the DMs on Twitter. I love interacting with fans. This season, to me, feels like Tennessee has been brewing up a concoction to get to this moment. So you're underneath Josh Heupel. Most of the recruits are the players that he envisioned being a part of this program. It's a lot of returning players on defense. It's a high-profile offense. The quarterback basically is the second coming of Peyton Manning in some people's eyes. They spent a lot of money in NIL to be able to bring in Nico Iamaleava. And even though the schedule does feature a matchup with Alabama and Georgia, this feels like a team that can go toe-to-toe with anybody. You look at most preseason rosters, mine included, they're a top 15 program. And in large part, it's due to what they brought in via the transfer portal and what they brought in on the recruiting trail. Getting guys like Lance Hurd from LSU, Chris Brazzell from Tulane, also adding in Mike Matthews, the former four-star from Georgia. You also bring in Braylon Stanley, the wide receiver, Boo Carter, the four-star safety from Tennessee. There's a lot of potential. And this also feels like finally a team that's going to be built in Josh Heupel's image. That's not a shot at all at Hendon Hooker or Joe Milton. Hendon Hooker was in the running to win the Heisman and probably could have been in the college football playoff. And Joe Milton, well, best of luck to you when you do whatever you do in New England. I don't know what happens there. But now you get the quarterback that actually was handpicked by Heupel, Nico Iamaleava, and you spent a lot of money in NIL to get him in here. And now conversations around this team feel like, well, it's Nico or bust. We're riding on the coattails of Iamaleava. He is going to be flying high, leading us touchdown by touchdown every single drive, and we're going to be right in the driver's seat when it comes to being a college football playoff contender. Okay, Tennessee fans, let's come back to reality for a moment. I think that you are a very good team. And I don't think that the bowl game against Iowa, one of the best defenses in college football, with the mastermind and Phil Parker calling the shots, did any favors for you. But just remember that this is also a very solid kid that is going to have time to grow. He's going to have to be able to learn every nook and cranny about this offense, and the only way to do so is with experience. The best teaching method is going through the growing pains, going through the lumps, going through the trials and the tribulations. And there may be a hiccup along the way. Potentially against NC State in week 2. Potentially when you travel back into the home of Josh Heupel, Norman, Oklahoma. Potentially you have a hiccup a little bit when you go play against Arkansas after a bye week. How does Nico look in that? The good news is you don't need to say the entire offense is headlined by Nico Iamaleava. You got a good tight end that you brought in via the transfer portal and Holden Sales. I love the kid. I think he's going to be a plug-and-play addition for what Heupel wants to do inside the red zone. You also bring back Squirrel White. The kid is lightning in a bottle. He runs like 22 miles per hour. That's speeding in some school zones. You get back Brew McCoy. Mike Matthews, I think, is going to be an absolute superstar sooner rather than later. In fact, you actually hear Deontay Thornton talk about him saying he's unstoppable. Well, if he's unstoppable, how good can Nico be if he's targeting him downfield for 20-plus yards? You also still have a ton of offensive linemen back. 3 of your 5 starters are back. Lance Hurd is coming on over. He's going to be your left tackle, which means John Campbell is moving over to the right side. Cooper Mays, Javonte Spraggins is back. They have combined 95 career starts. That's a good thing. And The schedule is pretty manageable. Yes, you start off with NC State and Oklahoma, but you also have games against Florida. You also have games against Kentucky, Chattanooga, and Arkansas, plus Kent State. You close out the year with games against UTEP, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. So basically, we're talking about potentially a 9-3 season. Now, what's the thing that could derail this Tennessee defense? It's the secondary. It's been the secondary. It continues to be the secondary. As good as the pass rush is, and as good as you have a playmaker like James Pierce, who might end up being the defensive player of the year in the SEC, he might even be the #1 overall pick, which would be phenomenal. I mean, he's probably the best pass rusher you've had since Derek Barnett in 2015. You still realize that if your secondary has more holes than Swiss cheese, it's basically out of luck. You have a great front seven. I love this linebacking room, even though you did lose Elijah Herring. You're still in a really good spot to believe that this team can capitalize, categorize, and really just dismantle any opponent they go toe-to-toe with in 2024. They can't if the secondary holds weight. Like, do you remember in the game against Alabama in 2022, Hendon Hooker balls out, and then he watches as Jalen Hyatt walks in for a touchdown, only to see Bryce Young go ahead and meet the same standard on the flip side, and it's a back-and-forth battle, shootout formation, and then you get the game-winning field goal. Well, you don't want to have that every single week because this is a young quarterback. Hendon Hooker was a starter for multiple years at Virginia Tech before he decided to come to Knoxville. So he kind of had the experience of being able to play under pressure, playing in monumental games, playing in highlight moments, key elements, being able to understand the hostile atmosphere that was a rivalry like Alabama. Nico Iamaleava may not be ready to do that just yet. But if you have a good secondary, you have a good pass rush, you get the ball back in his hands, and weapons that are key elements of this team, plus a decent run game headlined by Dylan Sampson and a ton of unproven but also promising players, that's a good thing. You don't want Nico Iamaleava to be your savior. You want him to be an X factor, but part of that X factor means having a great supporting cast. You go to the movies. Do me a favor. Pick your favorite movie of all time. Usually, they got a leading man, and then you got a great supporting cast. And yes, of course, the accolades go to the guy that is easily the headliner in the picture. But what do you remember most? Do you remember his lines, or do you remember a moment between him and a side character? Do you remember a moment where the supporting cast is actually taking on a bigger role? Because to me, that's what will define a winning season for Tennessee. I think it's just proving that you are right there. It's year 4. You have the offense. You have the players back. You saw players commit to Tennessee, not because of NIL, but because they believe in the future. You added in a guy like Chris Brazzell that's going to be, I think, an upgrade over Raimo Keaton. You added in a guy like Mike Matthews that's going to be here for the foreseeable future, and he may already be a plug-and-play addition week 1. You added in some good defensive linemen. You added in some good depth. How quickly can this team mesh together? I don't know if a winning season means going to Atlanta, then losing in the SEC championship, only to be still go to the playoff. I think being in the playoff hunt, finishing as a top 13 seed with the outside looking in, or at number 11, or at number 10, that's kind of what you want, because this team is good enough to do that. This team has the inertia, the drive, the determination to get over that hump. You no longer want to be known as the Tennessee of old. You want to be known as the Tennessee of really old, back in the Philip Fulmer days, where everybody feared walking into Neyland Stadium. And yeah, as an Alabama grad, it makes me annoyed that Tennessee is really good at football right now. But they are. They are. Now, can they be great at football? That's the key element here. And I do believe that when you look at what this roster is, if you're not so codependent on Nico Iamaleava to be the go-to frontline center, Mr. Consistency, and allow him to have those mistakes, but give him a great supporting cast that will open up a lot of avenues, I think you're in a much more substantial situation. To me, when I look at Tennessee, what defines a winning season is getting over that hump. Finding yourself right in the hunt of a college football playoff berth with 12 teams, and finding yourself potentially being good enough to make it there. Because the one thing I will say is if Tennessee does get into the dozen dance, they are one of a handful of teams with enough talent on offense and maybe enough of a front 7 pass rush that is going to be horrendous to play for any team with a weak point. Tennessee has some flaws, but not enough to take them out of the running for a college football playoff birth. But let me know in the comment section down below what defines a winning season for Tennessee in your minds. Is it going to the playoff? Is it making it to the Atlanta? Is it making it to the SEC championship? Download the podcast version of the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. Make sure also you're following me on all the social media platforms at Mr. Cole Thompson. Make sure that you also tell friends, family, mortal enemies, festive bros, and college football fans everywhere about this channel. And for those of you that are celebrating Memorial Day, number one, thank you for your service. And number two, please remember to drink responsibly because I want you all back here on Monday for Monday Mailbag. I'm Cole Thompson. Have a safe and wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Later. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. That's awesome. Thank you so much. But before you leave, make sure that you hit subscribe. And if you want to check out any of our other great work, make sure you click on one of the videos here. Am I pointing at the right spot? I'm not entirely sure. I'm really not.